I can kick this off. And
Yeah,
we'll
I don't know if anyone else picked up stuff from Colin, but I picked up a small raft of things from Colin when he left and shipped them over to Tracy, more or less, just at the end of last week. So we're kind of split in half half, but she's totally open to picking up stuff that was Colin's if it came your way too.
Yeah, so
Cool.
I this is our first time recording a PMM call in quite a long time. So if anyone has got this on YouTube Unfiltered, hey, welcome to the PMM call. So one of the topics is Tracy is congrats Tracy. Hey, it's excited you're on PTO now, but we're all super excited and happy for you. And to Brian's point, anything that you all picked up that may be in Colin's absence is now a good time to shift over to Tracy. Anything that is PubSec will be on our plate, and we'll have to figure out what components of that we can cover and what we can't. And there's one other thought I had there, but it's slipping away. So one thing I'll share is I am on CMO Shadow for the next 2 weeks. So Ty has been on CEO Shadow. Tracy has been on CEO Shadow. I like to tell people I got like an intensive CEO Shadow in like my first 6 months because we were small, and it was like I was very privileged to be able to have a lot of time with Sid during that season. But I've never done an official Shadow. So the next 2 weeks I'll be doing CMO Shadow. Honestly, I thought it might fill up my entire day. It's not looking to be like that, but it may constrain a little bit of bandwidth. And if you can't get me on Slack, I'll probably respond in the next couple hours after I'm off of shadow duty. Somebody added an agenda item on inbound marketing.
I was just echoing something from last week, which is that the groups keep falling one by one into getting into the 2 week cadence for sprints. And I think someone even finally taught Slackbot not to slap back when you say sprint. So now's the time to get in. The water's warm.
So inbound marketing has moved to 2 week sprints. I will just say candidly, in my mind, I'm punting on us figuring out our kind of issue cadence outside of GTM motion. So my kind of guidance is like with your GTM motion teams, you should have a good cadence there. And for any other PMM work, we need to like rework our system. There's like a 500 line file that like automates our issue labels, and nobody has touched that file. Anybody who knows anything about that file is gone. So in my mind, there's some amount of work for us to figure out what we're going to do with issues. I want to greatly simplify that process, and I'm kind of punting that down the road. That's my thought on that. But eventually when we get there, maybe we do 2 week cadences.
Yeah, it seems like the go-to-market motions should be what these are built around, right? Like it's hard for me to, so they're going to have 2 week sprints separate from what the go-to-market sprints are supposed to be, or scrums or all that. Do we know?
Are those separate, or what are they the same? Are they like snap to grid?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, if they're, I mean, I don't know if they're the same milestones, but I would hope that I would assume that they would be at least the same cadence. Like being off a week seems like it would be difficult to manage, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, theoretically, that's interesting because theoretically it feels like go-to-market should be what we're all grouped around, and then everything else is auxiliary right now. So like theoretically, you really shouldn't have a whole lot of time to take on new stuff in 2 week sprints outside of these go-to-market motions.
You're saying for this team?
For anyone on the core.
For anyone on and marketing.
Anyone on the core, yeah. It was like 80-20 was how it was described to us, right? Time. So like 20% of our time is not enough to serve up, compelling stuff in a 2 week sprint each time, when 80% of our time is spent elsewhere. So I agree.
Okay, well, cool. Then if y'all are using issues, keep using them. I would say focus on GTM issues, and we'll kind of figure out team or auxiliary stuff in a bit. Brian, you want to share your thoughts on 13.9 release post retro?
Sure, happy to. Now that was actually shared in the video, and check the video out when it's close to your release post time. I kicked it over to Cormac, but the really, really short version is that we added a section for wider community contribution highlights. And it did really well. And it did well for a few reasons. We just had really good quality contributions, but also because I nudged the social and evangelism teams just to say some of these folks are the usual suspects just in general. So they interact with us a lot on Twitter or elsewhere, and we should actually find them out there and then thank them specifically. And when we did that, it led to a small wave, like a wavelet that kind of spilled over into Hacker News and ultimately pushed the Hacker News for our monthly version up onto the front page, which led to a really good amount of traffic. And I just saw it in the first place kind of looking like this in purple and thought, what's going on? Why would this release post do particularly better? And it maps to a lot of things aside from that, like even the day of the week that release posts go out is a factor, stuff like that. But because we were able to pick out something that we could actually replicate, I wanted to make sure that I put it in a video, and so I did that. I don't think there's much more to say about it aside from actually seeing the video. Oh, in the post, I saw Cormac had a raft of stuff that was quality of life improvements, and just in case I didn't say that part in that other video, I mashed a section up for that with the so much more section. And William had started this quality of life improvement section in 13.8, which was a really good way to group all of those UX things. Mostly they're about efficiency, but if it's not enough to be a theme. So that's the way I kind of did it for 13.9. It was really convenient to have this section in the dying hours of editing stuff, because stuff would come in from whoever it was who sort of said, this should be primary and it's not. And this was a way for us to also stick a couple more things in here that weren't already in the release post without busting up the narrative. So I think that's about it.
Awesome job, man.
Yeah, thank you, because I need to close on my initial draft of this today. So that's
Cool.
That's helpful.
Yeah, and Parker, in the video, I was toying around with the unofficial CI/CD logo and some guitar spikes and stuff, so just for fun. Anyway.
Nice. I've got it open
You'll like that.
to check out. Yeah.
I think the intuition here is, and we have a lot of data. We've been doing data on release posts for a long time. As Brian mentioned earlier, some of the data we did last time was it's highly, highly dependent on day of the week. Unsurprisingly, if release posts go out on the weekends, they get no traffic. They go out on big major US holidays, they don't get any traffic. If they go out on like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all of a sudden they get spikes in traffic. That's not very surprising. But the other intuition is we typically highlight like one person. We call them the MVP. There's some issues and movement around to change that name. It's kind of sports centric and US centric potentially. So they're going to call it like top contributor or something. So we tend to highlight one or maybe two people if they contributed the same issue. But Brian highlighted a whole list of community contributors. And unsurprising, people that tend to contribute to open source that are also influential in the developer community, that are also influential on places like Hacker News and Twitter. When you call them out by name and you say like, hey, we're so thankful for your work, and you list like 10 or 15 people instead of 2, and they all go and tweet it to their large follower bases, all of a sudden you get a lot more traffic. So I think there's some intuition there, and probably some other reasons if we could pick them apart why this one did really well. But
Brian, this is something we want to include as a part of all these posts going forward?
I would say always consider it and don't force it. How about that? Because it's got to be good enough to pass a smell test and that sort of thing. Obviously, it plays into Open DevOps platform messaging. One of the contributions that was really good in 13.9 was actually in the ultimate tier, for example. So it's not even just like the free and open source stuff. That source available is a factor there. I would do it, pretty much every month in the sense we also have now, we're averaging about 300 merged community MRs every month. So the quantity is up significantly over time. And there's good stuff in there, even if it isn't sort of handed to you on a platter. People usually nominate 3 or 4 in a given month. So there are usually a few really good ones to pick from who maybe just weren't the MVP.
Did you say
shouldn't have to do too much.
300?
Yes, we are now getting 300 like wider community. In the wider community, I guess that's the way we're phrasing it now, also to stress the fact that it's not just one or the other aspect of the community. But yeah, wider community contributions is now averaging about 300 a month merged.
Yeah, and so the GitLab community includes everybody, people that work at GitLab, our customers, et cetera. Wider community is like folks that don't work at GitLab. And let me ask this, Brian, if you had to estimate the time it took you to go and figure out what those other contributions were, like to get that section, how much like additional time did that take versus like the typical stuff you would do for a release post?
I probably spent a couple hours on it, at least in part because one of the sort of thin ice aspects of highlighting folks who don't work at GitLab is we don't always know entirely who they are. And if you're going to put a spotlight on somebody, you should check out who they are. If you're going to put a spotlight on some work, you should check that work out, that kind of thing. And so, even people who are contributing who are not using their real names, and you don't want to be like super investigator or whatever, but I would check people out enough that we're not elevating somebody who's distasteful for some obvious reason, and we just didn't look first. So I did a little bit of extra legwork beyond the nominations to sort of check them out, check out their organizations. If they made a contribution and they just happened to work at NASA, maybe we mention NASA, that would be okay. If they happen to work at Siemens, like definitely mention Siemens because an actual reference customer and that kind of thing. But don't dig like, obnoxiously deep. But yeah, I did some extra legwork beyond the sort of nominations on a silver platter, and it was worth it.
Filter out the trolls.
Yeah.
Yeah, two things to keep in mind. So one would be, even if their name is tied to a company, if we don't have explicit permission to mention them as like a GitLab user, don't do that, or check in with like Tracy's team now to make sure that we can mention that customer. Often you can't. And then, yeah, so it sounds like a bit of extra work. So my thought process on this, and Farnoosh's as well, was that's up to you as the messaging lead. So when you are the messaging lead, it's up to you what narrative you want to craft for that intro. So this is an option. You can see Brian got really good results out of it. It was also seems like a non-trivial additional lift. So that's kind of up to you on if you want to take that on for your release post duties. I put an MR in number 7. That was from last week, and really that's just read only. I just want to say thank you to everybody. I feel like we coalesced really quickly around getting DRIs for the PM team. I don't know the last time they actually had accurate DRIs, or I should say stable counterparts. So I think that's a really big deal. I think that'll be meaningful to the PM team, and thank you for everyone doing that. That MR is open now, and it's over to Anoop to merge. So I put a section here on PMM identity, and I would like to have a little bit of more of a discussion. Samya and I have been chatting quite a bit about it. Samya, you put together a spreadsheet. Thank you. This was like a, I did a survey a little while back, and so we took the survey results, and Samya kind of categorized those and put those into the survey. And actually, does anyone have a link to that handy? I just want to look at one thing. I think it's in our lounge. I just want to pull it up and kind of show one thing from that spreadsheet. Here we go.
Is this the survey with the self-scoring as well?
Yeah. So if we look at this, I think think this one, well, actually, no, this is that's stable counterparts. There was a, yeah, Samia, did you put that in? Does anyone have a link to that? Well, the thing I'll just share that was top of mind was, okay, so Samia took all of the survey results and then categorized them, and then we kind of stack ranked what we kind of thought was a priority. And I think that's a good step in the direction, but I don't know that it's kind of gets us to where we need to go. So I started to just kind of a whiteboard some thoughts, and I'll kind of share why. So these are kind of some whiteboarded thoughts. So why do we kind of need to document in an official way identity? So one big one is like prioritization. Like if you as a PMM understand what's kind of the core identity and core things that you're supposed to do, it helps you make individual choices on like, okay, I have these 20 things to do. And to Parker's point about saying no, I probably need to say no to 8 of them and really only do 2 of them. So if you kind of understand what the core is of what we're supposed to go accomplish, it lets you pick the 2 correct ones. And then the other one is to improve collaboration. So if other folks in the org, I know we've all talked about this ad nauseum, that when folks in the org, they kind of don't know what we do. So then they go to interface with us, and sometimes it can cause everything from awkwardness to conflict. So if they kind of have a clear identity of like, this is what PMM is supposed to do, and this is what we're doing, it really helps collaboration. And then the other one is, I would say, improve efficiency. And this is about it's kind of about personal prioritization, but it's more about like, what do we take off the plate so that we can do really well? It's not just about decision making, but then also like doing good. Maybe that is the same thing. Maybe this also improves efficiency. So towards that end, well, this is also, maybe I would just say like, scoping work, which is maybe it is the same thing up here. So the idea is we do need to scope some work, right? We're now like, 5 or 6 PMMs, and then Alita running competitive versus like a much larger team that we had just a few months ago. We had a much larger team. So that does mean we need to scope our work. And to that end, we need to make some decisions about what do we stop doing. So probably, I would say, absolutely every single person on this call should have a mental model for what you were doing previously and what you're going to stop doing, and probably even beyond a mental model, actually writing that down. And this is the reason why. So for example, Alita used to be a team of 2. Now you're a team of 1 on competitive. And at least for the next short amount of time, we don't have any open recs for that. So we need to figure out how to do a 2-person competitive practice with 1. And that involves what we're not going to do, right? Similarly, we have fewer PMMs. So some of those things that those people were doing, we need to pick up across the team. And some of those things we're not going to pick up. And then in order to make room for those things that are coming on, we need to stop doing some things. So these are the kind of, maybe that is a separate thing, like stop doing stuff. So the 3 things are like, help you prioritize, and I'm just putting this as a separate one, improve collaboration, and stop doing stuff. And so the other spreadsheet we had that I can't find at the moment, and I don't know, Sami, if you can pull up a link to the one that you had created, we stack ranked it. I think that was helpful for us as a team to kind of understand what we value. And kind of like one thing I think we all put almost dead last or second to last was working on the release post, right? So of all the things that we have, we kind of put that one last. But we're not going to stop doing the release post, right? Like maybe we do. Maybe, I mean, I suppose it's not like we can't have that as a topic for discussion or talk about, well, what would that look like? Okay, if we have all these other things to do and we need to take some stuff off the plate, if that's the thing we stop doing, what are the implications of that? But my thought is that we keep doing that in some form or fashion. So even though it was kind of ranked as the lowest priority, it's not the thing that we're going to stop. so we do need to come up with a list of things that we stop. So
Well, I have a question because this kind of ties into the point that I listed. And I do have to drop at 11. So if we don't finish, I just want everyone to know I'll have to drop off. But how are you going to address issues dealing with things that we do that are high visibility? So the expectation is there that we continue to do it, but we really don't have the resources to do it.
Yep.
And my example there is DevOps tools. I mean, that has a lot of visibility on it. We know that that's, one of the sites that Sid loves. So how do we deal with ensuring that because from my understanding, when I first joined, the expectation is that new analysis are produced every 1 to 2 months and shared during the group conversation. How do we keep up with that?
that is an awesome example. So we are not going to be able to deliver the same cadence of updates, especially just quite frankly, and I'll share this with all the folks in YouTube land as well. The last time we did a big update to that, we consumed the entire team's bandwidth for maybe a month or two. It was a huge project. We did get better metrics, like in terms of bounce rate and time on page, but it came at a great cost. For example, there's a huge amount of conflicts we have now with the alliances team because of these graphics that we generated. So we took the entire team's time to generate graphics.
And TMM's time as well.
And is PMM and TMM and market insights. We took all of Ashish's org to do this thing. You can hear the annoyance in my voice that I don't feel like the juice was worth the squeeze, because now we have these graphics and now the graphics even causes conflict, and now it's even more work for us to go do. So I want to avoid that kind of thing. It's very important that I think if we're going to get to the most important things, we got to not do stuff like that. So that means scoping the work. So Lita, that's like as competitive, like you own it. And so you and I can work together to scope that down. And I have some ideas. I even saw on your slide, you have some ideas on, okay, we were doing this, but now it's going to look like this. So it's a two-part work. One is we're going to scope it and we're going to define this is what we're going to go do. And then we're going to go communicate that. And we're going to say, like, this is our promises that we're making. And at GitLab, we keep our promises. So that's my thought around it. That's what this exercise is. I don't know that we dig into that one specifically right now, but I
don't want to dig into it right now. I just thank you for that. I'm glad, you and I have talked about it. But I would also say that we may want to do that sooner than later. My concern right now is we get to the next group conversation and there's this expectation of where all these new analysis your teams have done. So I want to make sure we clear up before then.
I would like to get to this in the next week or two. Ideally, this kind of idea of like, what does the team do and what's our responsibilities? And even including you, Lita, I think that we need to even look at this identity as like, we have folks that are product marketing managers, but we also have competitive as part of our team. That's part of the team identity. So I'm honestly, I'm not quite sure. So maybe I'll just ask this to the team. I'm not quite sure like which of these would be helpful. So I do think that we need to have like a list of responsibilities. There's probably 3 to 5 things that like we do or are the DRIs for. I do think we generate a list of core capabilities, and this stuff goes in the handbook of like, for example, if you're new to the team, or for example, if we promote from within, eventually, I would love to like have folks that want to join the PMM team. This is part of every other PMM team at every other company I've ever worked at. And so I was like, okay, I'm new to PMM. What do I need to be good at? Or even for us, like maybe you're really, really good at storytelling, but you really need to work on your like competitive insights. I don't know. So core list of capabilities. And then these are the 3 that I'm kind of not sure of. If these are artifacts. So I think one option is for us to generate a list and say, this is a list of things I focus on, and I focus on them by percentage. And so if for example, that release post is 3% of your work, then that's how much time you dedicate to it. If you know that this activity is 50% of your work, at least you can relatively say, okay, this is taking up too much. I need to say no to it more. That might be one way to address it, is you have like, this is stuff I do, it's broken by percentage. The other way is we might just have like a stack ranked list of activities. Like this is all the activities I do, and above the line I'm gonna do, and below the line I stop doing. And then the other one is maybe just a simpler, if y'all have done continue, start, stop, we just make a list of what are we gonna stop doing. Does anyone have any thoughts on like this, generating this, one of these assets?
Well, +1 to putting it in the handbook, because I think the current description of PMM in the handbook is pretty vague. Maybe it was deliberately so back in the day. So that's really helpful. But I also think that exposing this framework proactively to people in the company will not only give them an idea of what we do, but why we do the things we do, so that when we tell them we can't do it, it's not a surprise. Because I've had situations in the past where I've explained to someone why we can't do something right now, and it was a well-reasoned argument and they understood it, but it was new information to them, so they didn't necessarily take it as well as they'd wanted, because they had been counting on things happening. So, we worked it out, but I think that this will help with that.
And then do you have so what I will definitely add this week will be what I'll call this responsibility section. And I feel like these three, I feel like are pretty confident about. I don't know if anybody wants to add, and I realize I'm on a separate document here. I'm on this like identity whiteboard document, not in our meeting notes. But if they're like we're responsible for this, I feel like these, if there's anything else, you can kind of add it here. But how about towards, yeah, what do you think, Samya?
Sorry, just a quick point here. I believe for each of these that we decide, we probably need to add an example of what that would actually entitle. So when we say messaging and positioning, it can mean different things to different people, right? What does it mean at GitLab? And it could just be one or two examples, right? Similarly, interface between sales, marketing, and product. What does that mean? Is that sales enablement? I think we need to expand this a little bit more, but yeah.
Like with examples, or like some like things that can help people visualize or understand some of the pieces that actually come out of it and the work that's actually done. Yeah. I think that's a good idea, because messaging and positioning, right? Someone may have in their head, oh, you sit, you think about a good tagline, and you write it down, right? When in reality, it'll probably take us a week or two to get to something, refine it, share it, feedback, chip it down, all that stuff, connect it with personas, right?
Yeah, and this goes back to the stack rank that we did, right? I saw that a lot of us actually marked web content as lower down in the list. But if we are focused on messaging and positioning, then, a lot of the things that were in that list, like competitive understanding, like understanding the users and buyers, like putting that messaging and positioning out there, either it could be through marketing materials or it could be through web content, right? So I would think that some of those things were more of deliverables that kind of tie with messaging and positioning. So, but they may not be actually an activity, right? So I think it would help us to define, when we say messaging and positioning, what does it mean? It might mean that I'm going to listen to 10 customer calls to understand how we want to shape our messaging, and based on that, I might create a deck, or I might update my web pages, right? So that's just to kind of explain to customer what or the rest of the org what we actually mean by that.
So so we'll attack it iteratively. So first we should get like the 3 to 5 things that like we're responsible for, and then we'll iteratively, like maybe we'll just add one example, or we'll iterate on the handbook and like eventually those are sections. So we have like maybe even a whole page on what is messaging and positioning, what's good messaging and positioning, and what are the activities that contribute to that, you know? So how can like listening to calls on Chorus help you write better messaging, positioning, that kind of a thing. So I don't want to go right up to the hour. Honestly, right now, I want to treat this call like it ends at 10 minutes before, so you have time to like prep for your next stuff. So I would say we're over time now. Any thoughts on just this idea that we need to cut scope? And we can chat more about this in one-on-ones and async as well. But does anything come top of mind on like, we do need to cut some scope. We have less capacity. We need to make some room for some things. A good tactic to go and do that.
Oh, I wish I had I wish I had some great input. I'm not sure anyone else.
I do think that we should be sure that as we create our criteria for ordering our backlog of group work or personal work, we get buy-in from the rest of the organization. Just to make sure, I mean, because someone may have, you know, Todd may have a very good reason why he might want us to shift some of that around, or something we don't know. But otherwise, I think it all sounds great.
Yeah, my only advice would be to do it in an issue, and not just the decision, but the process of the decision, like they do over in product. So if you ever wonder why they're making these moves, you can always track back in the issue and see the debate happened there in comment threads. And if anybody wants to disagree, you can always point back and say, well, these are the considerations. This is why we decided to cut X. And you've got that issue.
So that's a good idea. Maybe, so absolutely, like once we have like issues and then we can say yay or nay to this issue. I think what I'd love to see is maybe a little bit of a preemptive of, well, I used to do this thing, or I used to do this type of thing. And I probably wouldn't do that if on the current team structure. But maybe we just wait until we have issues and then we like start scoping the issues. Okay.
I think that seems reasonable.
All right. Well, cool. Then I think the good news is I think within this team, we all tend to be pretty aligned on what we should be doing. And so I'm going to make an effort to start getting this stuff into the handbook. And like I said, anybody can also feel free to start an MR, but you'll start seeing some MR soon, and I'll be tagging y'all.
Cool.
I know there's an agenda item or two we didn't get to, but I would like to cut the meeting. Samia, do you want to?
Yes. So that deck that I added in the agenda is something I did last year. Cormac and I presented that in the sales enablement. That seems to be pretty well received. A lot of the field folks refer to that. So I made a refresh of that deck last week. So I'd like to get your feedback on if you think anything's missing. It's basically a summarization of our analytics, dashboards, and reporting capabilities. I'm thinking I should move it to the handbook as well, because I don't think we have one central place where we talk about it. But yeah, would love your feedback on that.
The only thing I can think of is that if we went through and tagged each feature by tier, it might be, or at least put it in the notes, which tiers. I mean, I can.
Yeah, so there is a slide towards the end where I talk about which tier each of the dashboards fall under. And I think on every slide, I also mentioned that.
Oh, yeah. I missed that. My bad. Sorry. So that's it. I've got nothing.
Cool. Then let's let's take a look at that async as well and provide Samya some feedback on that. Let's post a thing in our channel as well. Thank you all for a fun call, and I'll upload this video to YouTube Unfiltered.
Very
Yeah.
See peeps.